Welcome to the first lesson about lathe working. Today we're going to explore the Litton HTJ lathe, which is my lathe. You can see it's in pretty good condition with a little mess here and there. Currently I have only one chuck on, and you'll see the reason for that in a second. Right here is its little panel for where it's from and what it is. You can see it's an HTJ 093 lathe. It is from Litton Engineering Laboratories, which is in Grass Valley, California, which is about 3 hours north of where I live. So first we're going to start off with the control panel. Every lathe that I've ever worked on has a slightly different control panel. The Littons have standardized this one. Some have some things that mine don't, and my lathe has some things that others don't have. So right here you'll see the speed dial. This is the power light. It is not on, which means the light is dark. This is the remote or local switch. It controls this being turned on or off. Here we have forward and reverse. My lathe can stop entirely, which is the brake. It will run forward, which in American lathes is away from you, and it can run in reverse, which is it'll be towards you, spinning towards you, and in Europe that is forward. So Americans decided to do a little bit different. On my lathe you can turn off the tailstock spindle so that it doesn't move and the headstock will continue. I have a jog button which spins the lathe about a quarter of a turn, and then the run switch which turns the power on and off to make the spindles turn. So if we look up here, this is the headstock. The headstock on a lathe does not move. And you can see on mine I have all my torches are attached to the headstock side. We look down here, go across the bedway to the tailstock side. The tailstock is the part that moves. It has a hand wheel, and the hand wheel should move pretty easily. If it moves very difficult, you need to do some maintenance on your lathe. So here we have the fire carriage. I have a GTT on here that is on loan from a buddy of mine. The fire carriage also has a hand wheel, and on my fire carriage I have a magnetic Bunsen. I have a second Bunsen here. Okay, so beyond that, on your headstock and your tailstock, you have a bore, which is the hole that goes through, and you have a spindle. The spindle is the part inside the bore that spins, and the spindle is important to keep lubed. You should only need to lube it once a year on a Litton lathe, and you use these ports on the back side of the spindle and some red grease that they sell at Litton to maintain that. I have what's called a gas saver, so this turns on and off the gas that goes to my hand torch. I use a Carlisle Machine Works universal hand torch with a national blowpipe tip and a national number 3 tip. I have different tips that I can trade out for that. I also have, this is actually a welding torch. It's very small, very versatile. It can also change tips. This one is also a number 3, I believe it says on it. Yes, it's a number 3. And this torch is made by Victor. Then I have also a regular old national hand torch. It's got a 7-port tip. And then I have a Red Max hand torch from Nortel. This one is brand new. I just got it. I have an older version, but it never hurts to have a new one too. So over here on the control box, the Litton has a switch in the back that allows you to turn it on and off. So if I turn that on, you'll see my red power light comes on. This is the motor. You want to make sure that your motor has airflow around it. If you're right up against the wall with your lathe, you're going to have some problems. So back to this. This is a scroll chuck. This is a Litton scroll chuck. It holds the glass in what's called the fingers or the teeth. These are fingers technically, and these are teeth. the metal part that's inside here. Mine are steel. You can pad these. You can use lathe tape to pad your glass. I don't for the most part. So the scroll chuck, the reason that they call it a scroll is that the mechanism inside of it scrolls through a series of gears to open and close the chuck teeth and fingers. Right now on my tailstock, the moving side of the lathe, I do not have a chuck on it because I was going to change it, but I wanted you also to be able to see inside the bore. You want to try and make sure that your bore stays relatively clean. Sometimes glass can break in there and you want to be careful of that. So the other chuck that I have two scrolls, but the one I'm about to put on is called a planetary chuck. Now the planetary chuck is opened and closed by using a chuck key. In this case, Litton provided me with this big Allen screw or Allen key that will open and close it. So on the outside here, you can see there's a chuck key space, and turning that will cause a planetary rings inside here to open and close these chucks. Now, you ask probably what is the difference between these two chucks besides their action. The planetary chuck, a lot of people have a graphite donut on here. I do not have those. I just have some lathe tape that has sticky back stuck on it, which you can get the sticky back tape from Whale Apparatus. You can also get regular lathe tape from Whale Apparatus, which I have some here. This is a simple lathe tape made out of fiberglass. It holds the glass in the lathe chuck really nicely. So this chuck, the planetary chuck, is really good for holding round objects like cup feet or the bottom of a rig or the bottom of a flask shape like a Erlenmeyer shape. It does not hold tubing. So because I don't have the donuts on here, I can't hold tubing because these don't close all the way down before this part will touch on all three of them. So this is for holding flasks or spheres, anything like that. The scroll chuck, you can see it has these long teeth, and the long teeth will hold a tube in there really nice and flat. So that's the difference between those two chucks. Okay, what else do we have? On a Litton, so my Litton, because my shop is really small right now, is crammed into this corner, which stops me from being able to show you underneath the bed cover, which this thing here is the bed cover. On a Litton, it's a piece of aluminum that fits really nicely with some screws. Underneath the bed cover are the bed ways, and the ways you want to clean and oil weekly. If you're using your lathe like 40 hours a week plus, you want to do this cleaning and oiling weekly. You want to use Way oil, which you can get. The Litton people sell Vactra oil, which works great. Sometimes they have machine oil at the auto parts store. And you're going to want to clean these ways with kerosene and then oil them down at least once a week. You want to make sure that the kerosene all comes off before you put the oil on. And then on the back here, on a Litton, we have a drive shaft. Please pardon the dirtiness of my lathe. The drive shaft you never want to oil. You want to clean it with kerosene, keep it clean and free of dust, keep it clean and free of glass. Glass can sometimes fall down in there and it's really bad for your machine. So, you know, as that gets dirty, it will grind the gears inside the tailstock and make your lathe not work properly anymore. So lastly, I want to talk about kind of how the lathe runs. So I showed you the motor. So there's the motor. Inside here, this housing where the motor is, there are a gear, and the gear is connected by a belt to the drive shaft. And the drive shaft turns a chain inside here. There's a chain in there, and it turns the headstock. That chain also runs along, well, it is run by the drive shaft. And the drive shaft comes over here to there's a gear inside here called the stub shaft, and inside the tailstock is another chain, and that chain turns the tailstock spindle. So it's really important to make sure that all these moving parts continue to function. And Litton provides you with a manual for maintenance and talks about when you should change all these things and lubricate things. Just generally, you want to make sure at least once a year, every 6 months, you do some cleaning and some maintenance. Except for on the bedways, you want to do that weekly. And what else can I show you? I have on my lathe a little manifold set up for my air hoses. So I have this air hose goes to my mouth, and it comes down and connects to this 3-way valve. And one side goes to the tailstock, one side goes to the headstock, so that whenever I want, I can switch the air from the headstock to the tailstock, or I can put it in the center and blow air through both sides at the same time, which sometimes can be very useful. Down here I also have my manifold for all of my torches. You can see it is very full. I have 2 Bunsen's. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 hand torches and a bench torch, all going through these 2 manifolds. And these manifolds are anodized steel, I believe, from McMaster Carr, and then I got all the brass fittings from the welding store near my house. Airgas sells all those fittings. It's pretty easy to put that together once you learn about the fittings. So the manifold comes and it has what's called national pipe threads on it, and the welding pipes, the welding hoses, all come with what's called a B style fitting. So you have to get fittings that will go from the national pipe thread to a B style, and those are a very specific part that you can get from the welding store, but they don't really have them anywhere else. So once you get past that, you can see I have my plural stopper. This is a whale apparatus object, so it comes in a set, and this will plug a tube up to 70 millimeters, I believe. And you can see I burn the shit out of mine all the time, but if you put foil on it, it won't burn so much, and we'll talk more about that. This one is the low temperature. They also have an orange one that's a higher temperature. I would definitely recommend going for the higher temperature ones. I also use these boots. They are available all over the place. I think these ones came from Blast Shield. This one's for a 26 millimeter tube, and they go all the way down to like 9 millimeters. So now I'm going to put on this planetary chuck, and I'm going to set this guy down here so that you can see what I'm doing with this chuck. Hopefully. Okay, so planetary chuck goes on the spindle. So you want to put that on, push it all the way back to where it doesn't move anymore, and then it has on the back side a bunch of set screws. And the set screws you don't want to tighten too much. You want to tighten them until they connect. Thankfully, with the planetary chuck, you don't have to do too much straightening. But with the scroll chuck, you do. And I'm going to make a separate video for straightening the scroll chuck. So we're going to do, I like to do this kind of like you do car parts, where you do one and then you do the opposite one. Because if you do them in a row, sometimes it'll tighten on really crooked. One thing to remember when you're turning your lathe while it's not running, we do this a lot, if your lathe is in 0 speed and you want to turn it, you need to make sure to turn the off switch to off. If your motor is running, well, if it's in like the standard waiting mode to be able to start running, and you've got it in speed 0, the motor is still engaged. And if you spin the lathe towards you, that is pushing the motor opposite of what it wants to do, and it's really hard on the motor. So we've almost got this done, and then I'll be ready to finish these goblet cups. So we'll do a video on goblet cups later on, but for now, thanks for watching, and I hope this video was helpful. Please leave me a comment and tell me whether or not you liked it. Thanks!